So, I mean, you just have to do a very easy look at something like National Geographic Wild, and they've pretty much got a video on the chimps, you know. Which
this pack hunter is your own next of kin. Chimpanzees.
Really?
They share more than 98%
Yes,
of our
hello,
DNA. That makes them our closest cousin. Chimps were once considered strict vegetarians. But not anymore.
How's that come across?
They're one of
That's
nature's
a bit
most
jumpy
cunning
there, Harry, but
killers.
it looks pretty much like they're eating some meat
In
there,
some
doesn't it?
parts of Africa, a chimp will eat a ton of meat a
Eat
year.
a ton of meat a year.
Yeah.
Like us, they have complex sounds for communicating. This chimp gives the signal.
So the vegetards at
That
this
it's
point
time to
banging their
hunt.
vegetard Bibles and jumping up and down and calling us heretics and how dare we and stuff.
Exactly.
We have stolen their dreams, Harry.
We have. But they're out there on the hunt, on the prowl.
Hunting parties like this one may hold
Oh,
up
like
to 3
chimpanzees a lot
dozen
more now.
members. And their search could last
And
up to
the thing
4
is that we have
hours.
to understand is that the chimps basically are the only
They
other
hunt
animal that
25
actually is
species,
territorial,
including small
tribal,
antelope and
like
wild
us,
pigs.
and actually, it doesn't surprise me, closest relative, and
But they
also
found
undertakes
their
warfare.
favorite
No other
prey.
animal. You know, even wolves
Red-colobus monkeys.
may actually undertake like hunting in packs, but they don't undertake warfare.
Right.
Here's where brain
You know?
power pays off.
Chimps actually undertake warfare. They're the only animal.
They take
When they're
positions in
constrained,
the
when resources
treetops
are constrained,
surrounding
when
the
the
monkeys.
resources are not constrained, they're quite peaceful, even with their neighbours. So, very similar behaviour to humans. Constraint resources, warfare. Non-constraint resources,
With
or
the escape
collaboration or
routes cut
global,
off,
you know,
the
having
real hunt is
trade or
about
whatever
to
amongst
begin.
themselves, not a problem. It's the peaceful. And it's
These
really
monkeys are about
important.
to have a bad day, aren't they?
Yeah, pretty much. And what they do is they actually, the chimps actually have fast twitching muscles compared to us. So what they do is they're able to actually have those sort of really fast speeds.
Male monkeys will
they've got a
actually
lot of
fight back.
explosive strength.
But
Not
it's David
sustainable
versus
strength,
Goliath
explosive
without the
because
slingshot.
they need to get up
The
there
chimp
fast,
outweighs
grab
it
that
6 to
monkey,
1.
throw it, because gravity will kill it.
Youngsters and mothers are split up, leaving easy
Yummy.
pickings.
So
So
that ain't no banana, is it, Harry?
there's no banana, mate. There's no banana, and that's
Chimps
the
have
thing,
sharp
you know.
teeth, but to
And
kill prey,
here they go,
chimps
you know.
use gravity,
And
hurling their prey with
and the thing is,
lethal
when people
force
see this
against
for
a
the
hard
first time,
surface.
they're shocked. They are absolutely shocked that our common ancestor, there's the blood, our common ancestor is a hunter like us.
Half a dozen
The
monkeys
difference
might
is
be
their
killed in a
pH isn't as
single
low as
attack.
ours, and the reason for that
But
is, I'll
usually
get into
just
it later.
Big males
but
dominate
they're
the
eating-
group,
they're eating
so they
fresh
eat
meat,
first, just
Which
like
hasn't
the
had enough
lions.
time to basically for bacteria to grow on it.
Unlike
they don't
lions,
need a low
and like
pH.
humans,
There are reasons
males
for it.
share their meal with family and
Our
allies.
evolutionary development of hominins actually played a role why we have such a low pH, but I'll get into that later.
Well, there you go.
So that's one, and the other one. Let me just so I can actually switch between these in the appropriate way. And it's really important that that people realise that chimps are pretty much are focused on primarily on meat. You know, their interest is how do I get some of that meat. You know, but the way we've actually portrayed them is a very sort of disingenuous way. We've basically made out that they are basically not interested in meat at all, and
Well,
been,
clearly that's bullshit, isn't it?
it is pretty much, it is bullshit. I need to find out where there's researchers are actually talking about where there is fruit around and they're completely disinterested. They're focused on the food, on the meat. You
Well,
know,
you look at a chimp in a zoo and they feed them fruit and they get fat.
they get fat, and not only do they get fat, they also get sick and age quicker.
Funny that, isn't
You
it?
know, uh, the thing that that really people need to understand is that apes spend a lot of time actually competing for meat, and actually spend a lot of time competing for termites as well. And termites are very nutritionally important for them because they're very high in protein. So most of the termites that they actually go hunting, there are two types of termites. There's those sort of fatter type termites, which the Zambian government are looking for human use in at the moment, and they tend to be about 23% protein and about 50 odd percent fat, and the rest is sort of other things of fluids and stuff like that. They're pretty much a high fat type food, but they're trying to actually make it as a cheap source of food for the population. It's a bit like in West Africa where a lot of insects are used as flour, insect flour and stuff like that, because it's you've got land which is arid. You get a lot of insect infestation, and you might as well use that resource, and that's what they're doing. And humans have always done that since time immemorial. They've used the local sort of stuff. Okay, now I'll just show this part, which is termites. Now this is okay. So this is basically, the Jane Goodall. She's that researcher that went to Africa and actually when she was quite young and actually observed it. What they've actually found is they've got actually a sanctuary which they've built. They actually found that they were having a lot of when they had some areas where there was actually termite mounds, because there wasn't enough for the chimps, they were starting to squabble and fight amongst themselves, and they couldn't control them. So they've actually ended up volunteering and having this project where they've actually created a whole lot of artificial termite molds all over this sort of area. And the reason why they've been forced to, I mean, the early part of the video actually shows how they go through constructing these things and all that. We won't go through all of it because that's not the relevant point. The important point here is to make is that termites are very important for chimps. I mean, anywhere. This is another group of chimps of another subclass of chimpanzees, which basically also, they've been observed, creating multiple tools, and basically, and it's not only males but also females that basically do a lot of this tool creation and actually are involved, and even their youngs. That's where they're spending a lot of their energy. There's a lot of leaves around. I mean, if you look at it, there's heaps of leaves around there, and this is what they actually they actually notice. Look at these guys, and it's obvious. This is the Smithsonian. It's not some bizarre carnivorous group there to try and actually create propaganda like the vegetards do. This is basically the Smithsonian National Zoo. They actually talk about it. This is actual footage. This is their breakfast, termites. They get up in the morning and they go for termites. They're not interested in leaves. Leaves and plants are starvation foods. They do have fruit and they do eat legumes as well, but they're starvation foods. They're not their regular food, and that's what people need to understand. They're starvation foods. They're not regular food, and we need to get away from that sort of attitude of viewing the chimps as plant eaters, which they're not. They never have been, and it's just basically a lie that's basically been perpetuated for a very long time, by the actual vegetards to basically, because it fits their narrative, and nobody else has ever basically taken them on. They've never argued against it. They've never basically said, well, this is wrong. This is a lie. and so pretty much people have basically accepted that myth. And there's a lot of myths out there, in regards to their sort of way of living. Now, I actually found that other one, luckily, and I'll just. I like how they characterise them as brutal chimpanzees, the
brutal.
rise of the warrior apes.
Yeah, no sound.
I can't get the sound any higher. That's the only. There was 140 chimps in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Did you hear what he said?
No, we can't hear anything.
Okay. He basically, let me just. I'll put, because this is really important what he says about the old view that we've always had of what they do. And this is observation. These are people out in the field observing them. So let me just put that back there.
There's just absolutely no sound at all.
Anywhere.
Just read it.
Why
Can you read
hunt?
that?
Oh, right, got it. Yeah.
One old idea is that they hunt when they're hungry, when there isn't a lot of fruit around.
So they hunt when there's not a lot of fruit. That's the old idea.
But as things turn out, it's exactly the opposite.
Things fall apart.
There's no way another animal could survive that.
Characteristics are there. We just want to ignore them, or we want to.
When I heard
gloss over them,
that
or
Hare
we
was the
basically
one
want to
chimp
take
who had offered some
picture them
comfort,
in a
some
different light,
solicitation, some
because
support
it's never
against
suited
the
our
attackers. That didn't surprise me at all.
But they are hunters like us.
He's obviously a very interesting
They're out
chimp in so
there.
many different ways.
They're,
When the first
you know,
to
and you
tolerate
can see
us
these people,
as humans, have this kinder, gentler side to
it
them,
talks about the kind of
which is
gentle
quite
side,
unusual
because
for a male
we've got
chimpanzee.
empathetic genes like them as well, But it doesn't basically mean that we can't be hunters, and quite ruthless hunters, as we have been in the past.
Ellington died.
We just have basically outsourced
conspicuous
that
absence.
now to a slaughterhouse.
Yeah.
And that
Hare,
The story is chimpanzees are not animals that sit around in trees eating fruit.
pretty much.
Gosh.
Their focus is, and if you think about it, their focus is primarily on getting nutrient density, no different than us. I mean, the thing that actually helped our evolution move forward was basically trying to maximize nutrient density. All animals in nature do the same thing. Their focus, their natural urge is to get nutrient density, not to basically get poor density. They're not like the vegetards who are deliberately starving themselves. Animals in the wild, no animal without exception. It's only the lunacy of a disconnected population from nature today that actually has these bizarre thought patterns. But any animal in nature tries to maximize its, because as Darwin said, it's not survival is not survival of the strongest or the smartest, but the most adaptable. And most adaptable means you need to maximize the resource, to access the majority of resources you can within your environment. That's where the competition happens between different species. How you can actually maximize your, you see a plague of rats when they go into a grain silo. They are basically out for survival, for their species. They will go full tong, they're unrelenting. And all animals in nature are unrelenting. So are we, great hunters. We spread throughout the whole world, chased animals all over the world, into every single continent as we were depleting the different mega beasts around the place. We hit Australia, and within a very short amount of time, the mega beasts were actually wiped out. Then we burnt the entire continent in order to basically create grasslands, and so did the North American Indians, because there was nothing that you could domesticate. So you burn it and turn it into grassland, so animals can increase in numbers. So you've got hunting grounds. That is what all species have done. They've basically tried to maximize their caloric intake. That's the focus. It's all about calories and survival and building up numbers, because that's how a species survives in the long run. It's basic Darwinian. When you've got a romantic notion of the world and a romantic sort of mindset, and you can't see those obvious facts, you reject them. You basically go, no, it's not that. It can't be that. But it's really important to see those sort of things where people have done direct observations on these animals, not the old romantic stuff where people turned up, looked at it, and then went back to their little country shack or whatever, or they had the chimps in there and they just threw them a couple of bananas. That tells you nothing. And that's the problem we've had. We've had really poor science in that area, and it's been fertile ground for the vegetarians initially, and now for the vegans to exploit that and use that. And they always, they'll go, and if it's not that, traditionally they would say things like, look at the gorilla, and all that. But even the gorilla actually has been seen to basically tear bark and actually also eats a lot of insects. But it also has greater fermentation capability. It has more of a stomach that is more like a herbivorous type stomach anyway. So it can actually extract far more, not only short chain fatty acids, but also some level of protein from those fibrous plants, where chimps can't really do it really well. They literally have to eat their own shit to try and extract it. And that is only in desperation do they do these sort of things. When the pickings are low and there's not much fruit around or anything like that, and then desperation hits in and they go for the leaves. That's the last course. You go for the leaves and then you basically eat your shit in order to basically try to, because you can't digest it the first time. So you're trying to digest as much as possible, putting it through your body more than once. So this is what they do, and they've been seen to do that even in zoos. So it's nothing that new. Anybody that's gone to a zoo and seen chimps, they've probably seen this behaviour. So it's nothing that new. It's been known for decades. This sort of funny, quirky thing. But what they don't realise is because they're actually feeding them inappropriately in zoos, they're probably doing it more regular.
So there you go, vegans. Just put it through 3 or 4 times. You'll be all right. That's the answer.
Exactly. Solution to their problem, to their nutritional deficiencies.
Yeah.
Put it through more times.
Yeah, and it would be good to see some shit going that way instead of coming out that way from the vegans. So there we go. Good.
I thought you'd like that.
I do. I love it.
And that's the thing that people need to understand. I mean, one thing about the actual early type of our early ancestors is that my sort of view is that it basically the reason for humans from that common ancestor, which we both have, both the chimps, the bonobos, and us, and some of the other subgroups of chimpanzees also. I think that common ancestor, some of them within that common ancestor were more carnivorous than others. And I think because they were probably in an environment which was piss poor in other resources, they had to, it pushed them to the next level of starting to scavenge a bit to get a bit more meat and stuff like that. And that scavenging behavior, and this is why their low pH of 1.5, that exists in humans compared to other primates out there, and this is sort of a thing where people have said, oh well, then you're not really a carnivore, you're a scavenger. No. It's basically because we weren't big enough to hunt, that's all we could do is scavenge the leftovers from the lions and whatever else. So our pH had to lower below that of the apes in order to be able to utilize that additional resource, scarce resource in the environment. And that is the adaptation. I believe that adaptation then allowed them to consume more scavenged meat, and over time, that allowed some changes in sort of behavior, some changes in sort of because you're in a savanna environment, upright, you need to move fast because and that's the difference between the chimps and humans. Humans have fast, slow twitching muscle fibers. Chimps have fast ones. So we've got endurance. So we can actually move rapidly over long distances, and we can actually utilize that to rapidly move into an area, scavenge, take that away to a more secure area and stuff like that. So we need to have the endurance of basically being able to carry stuff, move it from one place that is not as safe. And, a large human today probably doesn't need to do that. You can see the Maasai, they go out with spears, and when the lions see them, they take off. They're intimidated. They know who the predator is and who the prey is. And that's how, people can go on and see Maasai hunting lions, and you can see the fear in the lions. They know who the boss is in this environment, in that environment. And the thing is, the small hominins of those early parts, quite a few, we're talking about 3 odd million years ago and all that. For them, they were quite short. They were upright, short, and they had very few smaller brains and very few ability to basically, take on any large animal. So they had to basically, their fibers had to change in a way where they could get more endurance. And it would have been, initially, they would have dragged things over a short amount of distances, and slowly over time, over thousands of years, that adaptation would have improved and allowed them to basically do it much easier over time. So everything is an adaptation from one. They weren't in trees anymore, climbing up trees very rapidly. They didn't need fast twitching fibers anymore. So that sort of changed the whole sort of morphology that basically they sort of had in that regard. And it's really important. So these are looking at body compositions of the sort of apes, which we're looking at sort of like different parts of the body and stuff like that. Sort of different tissues, the muscles as a percentage. So, and sort of the weight, like males about 40 odd. They do get up to 50 odd as well. And so you're looking at sort of the muscle, so there you go, 51 point, where that's the total in terms of percentage. And so you're looking at about a half. In the females, it's much lower, as you can see in most of the females. The males tend to have much higher, so much higher protein requirements in that regard. And so the sort of, if you think in terms, a 50 kilo, half their weight, lean body mass, that's 25 kilos. 1 gram per kilo is about 25 grams. 2.2 grams, or around about there, you're looking at something like 55 grams or whatever. Now, you're having termites. They are actually hunting termites from the morning, quite a few times in the daytime. So they're basically, probably having anywhere between, close to 80 or 100 grams of termite per day, potentially. The females seem to have eat more termites because they do less involved in hunting. They occasionally will go up to the male and sort of put their hand out like that and sort of ask politely, to be given some meat. So they sort of they grovel to try and get some meat off the males. But primarily, with their young, their diet is much heavier in insect protein than animal protein. It's primarily, which is an animal as well, insects, but it's more from an insect source, which is very high. I mean, if you think about it, you're getting 100 grams. That's about 70 grams of protein. That's not bad, So for 25, that's nearly you're getting close to 3 grams per kilo kilo of lean body mass. That's not too bad at all. We talk about getting about 2.2 grams as being really, really good and optimal. But these chimps are getting up to 3 just from the termites, let alone if you add the other meats and all that, how much more. So their protein is quite covered very heavily from animal sources, and their fats are covered by, because a lot of these animals are lean, and that's the thing. You're not getting a lot of, but this is the important thing, and this is where a lot of the veg tarts don't understand. Look at the fat. Look at the fat, very low. Their body fat is very low compared to ours. They don't need so much fat. So it's not a problem for them. They don't have big brains, so they don't need as much body fat as storage. We need a lot of storage as body fat. And if we, that's the sort of the sort of the difference between the upper part of the body where humans have far less sort of muscle, and we humans have far more in the legs. It's another reason why usually diabetes actually starts in the legs anyway, in those leg muscles. It's that's both our strength and weakness depending on our behavior. Here it is. So when we look at basically the fat, there's the difference between, the females have about 3.6%. The males have fuck all.
Yeah, no.
Look how
basically,
low.
That's nothing. Yeah. It's
nothing. Look and compare to humans. That's male Homo sapiens, 20.3. Female, this is sort of healthy ranges we're talking about, 36.3. It's off the charts. It's because we're long endurance animals that hunted, and we need stores of fat to basically go from point A to point B and have those stores to be in a ketotic state to basically use those stores and then come back. These animals have fast twitching fibers in their muscles. They don't have endurance. They can't go long distances. They have to focus on their immediate environment and what they can get in their immediate environment. And that is why they tend to be quite warlike, because when you're constrained by your immediate environment, you're in constant warfare. They are far more in far greater warfare compared to humans, because humans can actually escape an environment. They've got the capacity, the endurance. The chimps don't. So their physiology and their circumstances compels them to fight more, to be more warlike in their nature. And it's, it's the veg tards and all the other researchers that went out there hoping that they would find these peaceful, nice little apes were in for a shock, weren't they? You can actually see from that guy that it was actually talking. He said, we had this idea that they were going after the fruit and all that, and then we noticed that the complete opposite. They wanted the meat. They were into the hunt. Where's that juicy little ape, little monkey out there? That's what their focus was. And you can see really why they're actually prioritizing those sort of foods is because, they don't have a lot of fat. They don't need fructose to create fat stores. That's not the game. They need protein to maintain their bodies. Protein to maintain their bodies, their hair on their bodies, because that also is a protein, requires, collagen, So that is what they prioritize. And so for them, it's basically termites, and it's basically a focus, and it's less on fat. And so it's less on the energy side of things, in a sense. And so the prioritization is primarily that. Now, they do have, starvation foods. They'll eat occasionally some leaves and get some short-chain fatty acid. They also have been seen to consume, when they're sick, to consume more leaves. And it probably seems, and they are very selective on the leaves that they pick, so it must be for medicinal purposes. The research is not clear yet. Okay, they can see them, they're sick, they look at certain leaves, but really the research is in those sort of early days. They haven't really ironed things out. And that's why I'm not showing that, because look, humans also, hominins right throughout history, the shamans used certain medicinal plants for therapeutic reasons. We know this, it's been recorded. So it's not surprising that chimps do something similar, that this practice goes back way beyond even humans existed, or hominins existed. So it's very, very ancient. But unfortunately, it's been misunderstood by earlier anthropologists and earlier zoologists, and who were influenced by these sort of more romantic notions about nature, and went into the wild and basically came back with a lot of fantasy stories. And now that when we actually go there physically and we record them with cameras and see what they're doing throughout the day, it's a completely different picture. A completely different picture. They're not merely just. They're not even to that degree. Since they're prioritizing meat and termites, you really couldn't even call them, even omnivorous in a sense. They are really focused on meat. So. Yeah, they've got a sweet tooth like us, like all animals have a sweet tooth. But the focus, there's plenty of plants around. Why are they putting so much energy? You can just climb up to the tree, sit there and just be lazy as, no different than some of our modern humans that just in front of their computer all day playing computer games and just eating snacks, sweet snacks. Those chimps could do exactly the same. Get on those trees. Why put the effort? Why take the risk? Why take the risk of being injured? Why take the risk? If you think about it in logical terms, why take the risk? Why is Why is an animal prioritizing those activities? Why are they fighting over territory?
You almost think they need the meat, Harry.
Exactly. Do you think so? Isn't that would be a bizarre hypothesis that only a carnivore could come up with? But this is the sort of problem we this is the mythology that we've had for far too long in regards to our closest relatives. It just goes on and on about, and it's annoying. It's annoying. I mean, that we hear these constant things out there that are basically. I mean, yeah, I mean, I could say anyone could probably find, if they want to be selective, they could probably find chimps in the wild that were hungry as and were forced to eat starvation foods, and you can record that and you can say, oh, that's what they eat. But if you've got an environment like these guys were watching, and you can see these guys are basically just academics, they're not basically, some, strange carnivores or whatever. They're actually surprised because, like that other guy, he seems like a bit of a soy boy, that other guy, softy, the way he was talking, he was quite shocked himself that there was plenty of fruit around, but that old theory that we had doesn't seem to stack up. They weren't prioritizing the fruit, mate. Why are these monkeys not prioritizing the fruit? If people want to actually, let me just bring up that PDF, if people want to go, I'll put a link to this. It's about the chimp, strength to human, the sort of and it provides some information about those differences, about the fast twitching muscles and those differences. So if people want that information, that's fine. They can look at it. It's stuff that it's research and looking at the comparative anatomy between the two different, closely related species and all that, and those sort of differences. So, some people may have an interest in that. I do. Some people may not. But it basically just allows people to understand those differences in the way those fibers work, and why basically we have a different we've evolved a different hunting approach, and through that hunting approach we also evolved bigger brains. Is that off? Yep.
There we go.
Yep. And why we actually and I mean, I say to people that for a long time for a very long time, all the different hominins that came, they weren't very tall. They had similar pH levels, but they were basically scavengers to a large extent. It seemed it took something like a couple of million years before we started really evolving larger brains and all that, and I think it may have something to do also with communication, because there was actually let me just find it. There's actually a really nice video. This guy's really let me just turn it on.
You might want to do the screen share thing again.
Yeah, I know. I'm hopeless at this sort of stuff, mate. Sorry.
Join the club.
And this guy, what I've learned, I don't know whether you've ever seen this channel.
No.
He's a guy that actually lives in Asia, in Japan, and he's he's done stuff on the carnivore diet. He's done stuff on salt and stuff like that, and he's quite supportive of the things that we talk about. He's talking about the first languages, how they began, and all that. Some of the stuff's interesting and all that. I actually put a comment there, and I actually basically talk about symbology. That even apes like chimps have been shown to have symbology like us. Exhibited. So he's got a case. Let me just find that one with the chimp.
No sound, of course.
Oops. Let me just turn on. Yeah, I'll have to sort something out with the actual audio.
Yes, English, good.
Oh, let me just, okay. See, we use symbols, and other animals don't. So we use a symbol. So obviously our closest relatives, chimps, also use this method. So this was already in our DNA, this capacity, because it's from our common ancestor. We both had that capacity, and that's really important, Obviously, we've got bigger brains, and we've got the capacity to go one step beyond that in the way we use language. and symbology and all that. So we've got that, but that's because of bigger brains, you know. But the inherent capacity was already there, and that's important to understand, you know. And that's why, you know, I ignore basically the vegetards about, you know, other apes, because other apes are irrelevant. You've got to look at the chimps. That's who we have a common ancestor with, you know, where we've developed these traits of tribalism, warfare, of you know, hunting, all these sort of common traits from those early stages, and that's really important. I actually put a comment here that since the symbology was already there in our common ancestor with the chimps, I think it's more likely due to the anatomical changes of walking upright that would have facilitated the ability to make more complex sounds, and then as the brain grew, more complex vocalizations that would have followed. So that is sort of a hypothesis, obviously, but it's a logical. It sort of has a logical flow that, you know, you're upright, your you know, your larynx, all this sort of changes its morphology, and so you're able to make far you know, more diverse type of sounds and more complex and so in a sense use more complex symbology to express yourself and explain things and all that. And I believe that change in anatomy would have brought about then, with a bigger brain, these more complex symbology that would have followed through further developing this vocalization system. So it's really important that we understand that the common relationship that is there, and then how we've sort of moved to that sort of next stage, which these are little nuggets of truth and nuggets of knowledge, but what they do is they create a tapestry of an understanding of our roots and how these things have sort of come about. The key thing that basically really changed things radically was basically climate change, and everybody fucking hates climate change, but I love it, because basically about 2.8 million years ago is when we had rapid climate change in throughout many parts of the world. But it was actually, it seemed like the plateau of the Ethiopian plateau, or that sort of north east sort of Africa, was where there was a lot of sort of environmental change. Like from one year you'd have like desertification, the next year it'd just be flooding like mad. You know, there was a lot of upheaval in terms of, and a lot of environmental pressures, and that's where a number of these small hominins actually died out. A lot of them. There was, you know, like many of them were culled out of the gene pool, and so the ones that actually survived over 300,000 years, as the ice ages started coming in between 2.8 to 2.5, we basically had, you know, scarcity and more scarcity, and that actually put the pressure for those who are more larger in size, hominins, and were more successful hunters of diminishing resources, animal resources in the environment. Well, they were the ones that became the successful, and then eventually brought about the, you know, Homo erectus as the first large, true modern human that evolved at that time. And so from then, pretty much humans became very highly carnivorous, because a lot of people need to realize that, you know, we're talking about most of that period of up to 11,000 years was basically, you know, a period where there wasn't a lot of vegetation around, a lot of fruit and stuff like that. And you're talking about an environment that was very cold. I mean, you had even frost down to the tropical, you know, and subtropical areas, let alone in areas like plateaus, like the Ethiopian plateau, and those areas, much cooler, much colder environments. And so in those sort of areas, you really have limited food resources, and they usually on four legs. And so basically you have to become a skillful hunter to survive. And that's when we see that where human technology improves, and the archaeological evidence is littered. Anybody can go and research it. You know, it doesn't belong to me or anyone else. It belongs to the whole of humanity. And you can look at the archaeological evidence, and it's just stone tool after stone tool after stone tool after stone tool throughout that whole area, you know, to cut meat. You don't need stone tools to basically cut fruit, I can tell you. It's to cut meat. And that's why, and the amount of animal carcasses around those fireplaces, those primitive fireplaces, you know, just over the, you know, just beyond beyond belief, you know, the numbers of things that they find. And it's, you know, it doesn't surprise me at all, you know. I mean, the thing that actually turned it around for me personally is when Michael Eads, and he had actually, with the Ancestral Health Symposium, it actually showed me some work that was done by the Max Planck Institute in Leipzig, Germany. So that's where the sort of the anthropological sort of institute is there that that looks at you know, the past in terms of anthropology, and they've actually done the definitive studies on nitrogen-15. You know, looking at teeth enamel primarily from Homo erectus right through Homo sapiens, Cro-Magnon man, and we'll get on to Cro-Magnon man in a short while. And they were they noticed that, you know, basically the nitrogen-15 was off the show. You know, and anybody can go to the institute and actually download this information, get this information about the nitrogen-15 isotopes. So they had higher nitrogen-15 than basically, you know, Arctic wolves or foxes or many other well-known carnivores. You know, they were not merely super carnivores, but in many cases hyper carnivores. You know, that's all they ate. And it doesn't surprise me at all that, you know, and towards, and if you, you know, there's a bit of a story that the paleo community initially sort of put out. They were saying, well, the reason why our brain shrunk by 10% and the Cro-Magnon man sort of disappeared and we had the modern Homo sapien with 10% smaller brains and all that was due to basically us switching to agriculture. Actually, that's wrong. That's wrong. It has nothing to, well, agriculture is a necessity when you've got scarcity, but that isn't what was happening. Towards the last probably 100,000 years or, you know, probably 50,000 years before we actually got into agriculture, there was already, the climate was changing, was getting warmer. And as it was getting warmer, you were getting leaner food, leaner animals, so less fatty animals, because they didn't need to be as fat to basically keep warm, you know, have the insulation. So as you're having this explosion of hunters around the world and a diminishing resource, well, what do you think happens? Well, people shrink in size, and we've seen it. The Japanese cut out dairy and they shrunk in size, you know, one of their emperors, you know, people that are on islands sometimes that have don't have very little access to, you know, nutrient dense foods and become shorter and smaller, you know, so it's nothing surprising. And this is exactly what happened. You know, it was just basically your resources were declining, and towards the end, you could actually see there were a lot of innovations that were happening. Spear tips were actually being made that were basically much better at actually throwing at longer distances. I mean, even if you look at the Australian Aborigines, they actually have like a device where you can actually put the spear in, and you can actually control the throwing of that spear to get greater distances, for greater success and greater sort of accuracy, especially on an animal that's moving like a kangaroo. And so you were getting a lot of innovations that were happening at the time, and that's important. And so you know, you would have, like, over a certain mountain ridge, you'd have, you know, a group that was basically closely related to another group, and this group was close to the water, had diminishing resources, and then started using basically grains. accessing grains and started to use grains. And, so they started competing, and over time, one group domesticating animals and basically using grain was actually able to get more surplus. And that surplus gave them an advantage. And that's what then built civilization after that. Yes, it created a lot of health problems for us, rotting teeth and all sorts of things. You just have to see the rotting teeth of the Egyptian pharaohs. That's proof for that. And even their cardiovascular issues that have been well recorded by Michael Eads, which actually shows he actually shows certain mummies with x-rays where they show the calcification of the coronary artery and stuff like that. And they had man boobs and all that. And he goes right through. People should go away and see that video, and they will get. I mean, it's this one here where he basically goes into paleoanthropology. It's in the low carb down under website, and it really gives a really nice background about a lot of this sort of stuff that I've mentioned. And with quite a bit of detailed information in regards to it. But it's really important for people to. Was I sharing that? No.
No.
I didn't. Oh damn! Sorry.
It's all right. You can flick it up now.
I will. It's this one here. It's on the low carb down under YouTube channel. And that's that one there. So if people go and actually check that, they will basically get a lot of that information about Egypt and see what grains really do to you. And he doesn't actually say the word correctly, but we used to call the Egyptians, and their nickname was Artophagos, which means basically bread eaters. And they deserve that name because they used to consume quite a bit of bread, and as a consequence, their hair health wasn't that great. That's why the Indo-European Hittites that were more carnivorous and ate more meat were kicking their ass each time they went into battle. Literally. So that's pretty much covering most of the hominin stuff and all that. I mean,
can probably hit unshare now.
Yeah, to get a general rundown for people to understand that our common ancestor is not a vegan. Is not a vegan. That's what we need to understand. Not even a vegetarian.
No.
Our common ancestor is, a hunter like us. In peace as well. That's true. When there's no big competition. And especially the bonobos show that when you go to there's a major river in Central Africa. To the south of that is where the bonobos are. They're very peaceful, and they pretty much like how I would characterize in Greece, for instance, to this day, the islanders of the Cyclades and Crete, they still the women actually have a higher position. They are more matriarchal type societies from that tradition, and even like on the island where my sister's actually married in Milos, my younger sister that is, they basically pass the inheritance to the daughter. So they still have that tradition. So these those societies and the bonobos are very similar, where and it explains to it because when you've got scarcity. Chimps will be more involved in warfare in hierarchical systems where they need leaders to basically go out there and do the business. When you have peace and you're not fighting over territory because you've got enough resources in that territory, well, what do? You've got to do something with your life. So you have a lot of sex. So when you have a lot of sex, who becomes the boss?
But is sex what does that? I was wondering what the trigger was. Thanks, Harry. Now I know.
The female, basically, So women enslave us through sex and become our masters. So in societies where there is no need for competition, there's no need for fighting over resources, sex becomes a priority and becomes the most important part of socializing and creating alliances and relationships. So as a consequence, what happens is females get to the top of that hierarchy. And it's the same thing if you look at the at older civilizations that actually where women were at the higher rankings or had more rights, like the Minoan civilization, the Euclidic civilization, the civilizations on the islands of Malta. They didn't have other populations that could come in and actually threaten them at that time in the Neolithic period. So they were less vulnerable, so they were more peaceful as societies, less competition. And so as a consequence, they didn't need to have these big standing armies. That's why they were conquered like that. When the Indo-European Greek tribes came in, they were just literally able to conquer the existing pre-Greeks that were there with very much ease, because, and if the chimps could get over that river, those poor bonobos would be snuffed out very fast. They'd be basically their bitches, in a very short amount of time, But, that's nature, and, it's, yes, it sounds a bit, when you've actually lived in a city, you're a city slicker, and you've grown up and you in that sort of environment, these sort of things are unsettling. They are unsettling. We have to be honest about these things. And this is one reason why the vegetards and the vegetarians and vegans, they can cultivate this unsettling behavior. You've got indoor plumbing, you've got lighting, you've got the comforts of modern civilization, you feel comfortable, you're not involved in constant conflict, so it's not normal to you. So you reject it, all that. And so the same thing, reject the slaughter, reject this, reject the animal. It doesn't surprise me why in the 21st century they're making such big inroads. And I've called the vegans basically the fifth columnists of the food industry, of the processed food industry, because that's what they are. They're just being manipulated and they're just being misdirected. Powerful elites need to, when there is a movement that grows and could potentially threaten their profits, they might as well use it to go after those who are irrelevant to them. At the end of the day, it's maximizing profits. And this is the next stage, the next evolution in the food supply. The next evolution in processed foods, and it's basically Beyond Burger, all this sort of stuff. And while a lot of us think, well, the mainstream community are not really going to go vegan, no, they won't go vegan. But what they will do is they will go for the Beyond Burger, rather than the expensive meat. And so they may have like a bit of dairy, a bit of cheese, occasionally a bit of milk, a few eggs here and there, maybe a bit of chicken and stuff like that. But what they'll do is they'll make things like red meat very expensive for the rest of us that still want to eat it. So that is where the problem is, because basically the corporate interests, they're just interested in maximizing profits, in profit margins. And if you think about it, there's more money to be made in a Beyond Burger. The profit margin is much bigger, steeper than what it is for regular meat, and it always will be. And it's one reason. Bobby and Sean Baker and many others that actually are out there talking about some of these guys, and even Frankie has talked about some of this sort of stuff about how a lot of these smaller farmers are under attack by these big corporates, being squeezed out. And really, I say to people, we need to get behind, some of these people, these producers, who are connected either to Frankie or to, the different other groups that actually are selling meat out there, and different groups. I get a lot of. There's a local group down in Tasmania that actually produces like beef tallow, organic beef tallow, and stuff like that. So I support them. They're in my locality, and I say, if you find people in your locality that are producing good quality products, I've sent to Layla some links about local people that actually sell certain animal products in New Zealand and all that. I think I've sent you some stuff as well. And it's really to support these people in our locality and get the message out to people. I do it on my Facebook site and try and get people to know about these people so we can actually support them, because the more we support them, the more we will have this sort of source of nutrition available for us, you know. So it's a really important thing, because we're really fighting a big, a multi-billion-dollar industry, and it's a bloody hard fight. And I say, nowadays I usually say, maybe we're putting too much energy in worrying, or we're ignoring the real enemy. And the real enemy is really not the vegans. They're just misdirected, fifth columnists who are just basically, being brainwashed by a cultish movement. Really, the big players here are really the big agribusinesses, and that's who we really have to go after. And that's where we have to basically expose the seed oils. We need to expose all the inputs that are going into these products and how damaging they are to the food supply. And some of the people in the low carb, the carnivore, and keto community need to start doing research on what is in these foods, and actually exposing these foods for how damaging they are to our endocrine system and to our general health. Because that will be the sort of thing that will change the narrative out there. Because if the general public out there goes, ooh, this could be bad, they're not going to buy it. But as long as they think that they're doing something for the environment or doing something for this or that, then they will buy it. Because, as I said, we're far softer nowadays than what we used to be. We're not hunters anymore. We've outsourced that. And so we're much softer. And as a consequence, we're more susceptible to those sort of emotional, being manipulated emotionally. We're much more that, in the past, if you had said to a person, don't go out there and hunt, they would have looked at you and said, are you for real? Get out of the tribe, they would have told you. But nowadays you can say that and people basically say, oh yeah, you're really right, It's because it's a different culture that we live in. And as a consequence, that is the sort of the problem that we face. But we need ammunition. And I say to people, if you want information, put comments, ask me for stuff, because I'm a bit of a source of information, and I usually try and answer everything. I don't sometimes, like even last time between part 1, 2, 3, I got to 3 and then 4. A couple of them, I think I missed quite a few on the 5th one. Because sometimes there's only so many hours in the day you can actually answer every single comment. But if people want certain specific stuff, I do have an email on my channel, which I haven't started yet, but I will eventually. There's a link there for my email address, and you can actually contact me. And if you want certain information, I won't immediately be able to respond to everyone, but I'll be able to get some information out. It's much easier putting stuff in the comments area, and the reason for that is because it's easier for me than just to put a comment there for everyone, for the whole community. And I just say, for me, I put certain information out there and I don't really care if you plagiarize it. You can use my words. I've got no, this is a fight for our food supply and the integrity of our species. And, we have to win this fight. We just can't basically, and I don't care if people use my information. It's basically, guys, it's not copyrighted. You can use my information whenever you like. I mean, I put one of these posts on this is the vegan, let me just turn that, this is on I actually showed Bart earlier. We've got a vegan fest in Tasmania. God almighty. Exactly. And I've got a whole lot of veg tarts here that wanted to think that they were smart, and I sort of, put a whole lot of points that I debunk. I call it the myths and falsehoods of veganism. And I actually plaster this everywhere on the internet. Wherever I find a vegan site, I plaster this on there. And I hit things like, which is that apes don't eat meat, which is one of the videos that I actually showed today. about the sort of the bullshit about the ruminant agriculture, the climate issue and all that. Cover that. The sort of the myth, debunk the fiber myth, things like the microbiome and a study about here showing, because you get hence herbivore or hence dickhead that basically sits there and goes, I've got a great microbiome. I've got shitloads of Privotella. Well, you dickhead, it actually increases inflammation.
Mm. Yeah, and so does steroids.
Yeah, that's true. But interleukin-6 and many others, where the sort of bacterioid, certain other types of bacteria actually that when you can go up when you're actually consuming meat and fat and actually reduce inflammation. So we need to use these arguments to basically show that basically these people have no idea what they're talking about. There's plenty of information out there, and we need to post it. The alkaline myth, we need to blow that. The cholesterol myth, the egg. This old geezer was actually consuming 25 eggs a day. His doctor had known him for 15 years. His mates knew for about nearly 2.5 decades. And this guy was 88 years old, had normal cholesterol, had no issues with his heart or whatever else, and he was quite a regular 88-year-old, and had been consuming massive amounts of cholesterol, 25 eggs a day on average. This is a case study. Talk about a paradox, an egg paradox. It just blows everything out. These people say one egg could kill you. For fuck's sake, what is this guy? Superman? Superman.
Yeah.
So we need to kill. I use this argument. This is a study that was done by Stanford University. It was actually the A to Z study called. It was basically looking at the different types of diets, but it actually showed that the Atkins diet was better than Ornish. That's an important thing because all the vegetards always use the Ornish study and they go, oh, the Ornish study basically is superior. And even the biggest kicker about this was led by Christopher Gartner, who's a plant-based academic. Yeah. He's one of that group in Plant News and all that. He's one of that. He's disowned this. He's walked away from this study where in this he actually admits, in this Stanford video, he actually admits that even when they went back and looked at a lot of the data, even stuff that isn't even shown on the study, because it's a weight loss study, but when they looked at other things like inflammation and a whole lot of other things, they noticed that basically people on the Atkins diet was far better on all these markers. So the Ornish diet isn't going to do much for you. And remember, the Ornish diet isn't even really a diet, it's a lifestyle. It involves fasting. And we know fasting actually helps a lot. Irrespective of any diet, yoga, stress reduction, things like cessation of seed oils, which we know is a big toxin, refined sugars, we know is another big problem, and things like, smoking and drinking and stuff like that. So you take all the vices out, pretty much, and you add a whole lot of other things like to lower stress and everything else. And, maybe, yes, it does a bit better than your standard American diet, because that's what it's always been looked against. In all the studies, it's always been against the standard American diet, which is highly inflammatory and all that. Never against any other study. This was the first time it was put against the Atkins diet and the Zone diet and the nutritional diet. And all the other three really didn't do as well as the Atkins. Atkins blew them out of the water, completely out of the water. And then there was another study, which was the direct study. This was around about 2005, and this was done in Israel. This was even better. It basically, initially it was to do the direct study in Israel was to look at the Mediterranean diet and also the Learn diet, which is basically the one that actually is promoted by the NIH in America. So that's what it was actually, because it was a bit of funding from the NIH to the Israelis. And then there was an academic, and I forget her name, but she actually went over to Israel and actually said, she was a bit of a vegetard type, and she basically wanted to give them money from Harvard in order to add Atkins to the this was about 3 months before the study had started. I think 3 months or close to it, or I think it was 3 months around that period before the study really took off. And they added at the last moment the Atkins component to it, to this study, to the direct study. And what happened was that went over two years, and there was a follow-on after 5 years. And the other good thing about it is it's not only that they tell people what to eat, but on top of that, they also provided some of the food. Where with the Stanford one, they basically took them in, they gave them a nutritionist who told them, this is the book, read it, do exactly what the book says, and then apply it. And people pretty much complied in the first 6 months, but then they started falling off the wagon in the other 6 months. And you can actually see things starting to come together again. The most dramatic part is the first 6 months, where the Atkins weight loss and a whole lot of other markers actually improved dramatically. And that's the most important part, the 6 month part, because then the compliance dropped. Where the Israeli study, on the other hand, because they were actually providing one meal, and I think it was actually was it in the nuclear facility, I think it was in Israel, Winona or whatever it's called, I can't remember the actual name of the area. And they actually were providing like the lunch meal and stuff like that, and a few other things that people were taking home with them. So they were far more compliant in that regard. Obviously, Atkins came first. Mediterranean, which was actually not the standard Mediterranean that the NIH actually promotes, but a high-fat Mediterranean with 50% fat. So it was actually a high fat Mediterranean diet, which you find like in Greece, which I've already explained in previous chats that I've had with you. That came second, and third came to learn, quite far third, where the Mediterranean, because it was a high-fat Mediterranean, actually in some markers actually equaled the Atkins. Not in everything. The Atkins came first, but in some markers it actually equaled the Atkins, which doesn't surprise me with so much fat additional. The more animal fat you've got, the more fat you've got in the diet, the better you're going to get compared to sugar. But most of the vegetards, when they talk about the direct study, they ignore completely the Atkins arm of the study. They only focus, they say, oh, the Mediterranean diet did better than the learned diet. And whenever I hear them saying that anywhere, I hammer them and say, no, the Atkins did better. And I put a link directly to the study from PubMed, and I say, go and read it. Stop lying. Stop basically misinforming people, because the Mediterranean diet, while it may be a better diet than the standard diet or the learned diet or the Ornish diet or whatever, it's not the most optimal. And the only reason why the Greeks have pretty good, especially the older Greeks that actually, followed the religion, is because they fast for fucking half the year. So even some of the deleterious elements of the Mediterranean diet are basically negated from the fasting. So you've got to take that. It's and I tend to say to people, look, most humans in a primitive time, they would have had lean times and plentiful times when they really feasted and really went to town, and that's really that sort of swing between anabolism and catabolism, which is really important, I believe. And I think even on a carnivore diet, I don't think you can be anabolic forever. You need autophagy. You need to fast. The only difference is on a high fat, whether it's Atkins, Mediterranean, carnivore diet, or those, or keto, what the advantage of those diets is that you can constrain your cravings. You can fast. Where if you're doing the standard diet, where you're yo-yoing in between glycemic shocks and from hyper to hypoglycemia continuously, you're basically in the fridge every 2 hours, or sometimes even less. You just can't fast on such a diet. It's just not possible. So you're in a constant state of growth, in a constant state of anabolism. And obviously, that is why we see the most extreme. You see these people as they get sicker and sicker, You know, I went to I was like last time that I was at the hospital with a kidney stone. Yeah, my keto days are my high oxalate foods. And actually, that 5 years of doing paleo, keto, and sort of low carb and eating a lot of spinach and stuff like that, and sort of restricting the dairy which actually chelates, the calcium chelates and takes a lot of that shit out. But you know, I had that sort of brainwashing. Oh, I shouldn't be eating so much dairy. It's going to prevent me from losing enough weight and all this sort of stuff. And what I did was I started having like bacon in the morning with about 100 to 150 grams of spinach every fucking day nearly. And so, you know, I can tell you through that 5-year period, I was in hospital 3 times for kidney stones.
Right.
And I'd never had kidney stones before. So I was operated twice, and once it actually got through without requiring operation. And that's when I realised, there's something wrong here. This doesn't make sense. I'm less inflamed. I'm healthier. I've lost a lot of weight and all this. Why am I getting fucking kidney stones? And then I came across oxalates and stuff like that a couple of years ago, and I realised, well, you know, this is why. You know, I haven't had a kidney issue now. It's been, what is it now? About 3 years, probably 3 years since I've had any kidney issues. You know, so it's been a while, but that's because I got really rid of all those oxalate foods about 3 years ago. Yeah, probably the best thing. But I can tell you one thing: when I did go carnivore, within a couple of months, I was in trouble. I was basically, my kidneys were hurting, and I was dumping oxalates.
Yeah.
And my urine was all really foamy. And then I started doing a bit of research and I realised what it was, and I started hitting the citric acid, the apple cider vinegar, and all that sort of stuff, trying to break everything down. And eventually that did the trick, and within a short amount of time it sorted. I still get periodic ones that happen. I had one probably about close to a month ago. And I haven't had one since then. They just sort of come and go now and then. It just seems at some point I get a flushing, and it sort of really goes, oh shit. I know when it's on, and then I hit the citric acid and all that, and you know, and I'm fine. I do that for a couple of days, and then it sort of settles down, and then you know I wait for the next incident. I don't know how long this is going to take to flush out that, but I was a heavy spinach consumer. And yeah, unfortunately, I say to people, you know, learn from my mistakes. You know, we're not meant to eat that sort of shit.
No.
You know, it's just so damn toxic to our bodies, and it does so much damage in terms of the sort of stuff. And you know, actually, now we'll just cover a few other things, and we'll get onto the methane stuff, mate.
All right.
Let's get out of that. Let me just go down here. I've got all these bloody links breaking things up to try and remember where everything is. Anyway, I actually mentioned this earlier to you. I was sort of looking at, because we're sort of affiliated to Geoscience Australia, and so I was able to get this information. This is from the European Journal. Okay, this is the magazine, the periodical, the journal is actually called Biogeosciences, and it basically this article actually came out in basically the 14th of August. And it actually basically looks at the types of isotopes of methane, which is really important. There are different types, and that's really really important in regards to it. And they were basically looking. So cow farts are basically, you know, your carbon-12, and methane from shale oil is carbon-13. So basically, they've this just recently came out, and that they actually found out what is really causing that increase in methane. It's not cow farts.
Okay.
It's the shale oil revolution. The shale oil revolution, which is basically what Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama said was the greatest thing that ever happened to American energy security.
Mm-hmm.
These are the people that basically are out there with some of the other vegetards and all that are doing this about, how bad, the Clinton Foundation, the Bill Gates, all these sort of people that are basically pointing the finger at the cow, say, you bad cow, you're farting too much. When it's really basically shale oil and gas. That's what it is. That's basically what it is. People can go and get that. I'll put a link for people to be able to go and get it directly, so to download it and read it themselves, and basically to see, and they can actually put that bloody link on every single vegetard site and basically point out it's not the cows, mate. It's basically the shale. It's basically our so-called, because remember what they've been saying? They've been saying, oh, we should move away from oil to gas. It's less of a greenhouse problem. Remember they've been saying this?
Yeah.
And then they turn around, they've got the audacity to point the finger at cows and say, oh, you bad cow. Oh, you bad cow. You've been farting too much.
Cool. So have a look at that link. Do have a look at that link.
And also... And basically what they've been doing is they've been deceiving us all.
Yeah.
They've been lying to us. Misdirection.
And the other link that you probably need to look at sometime this week when I finally post it, I'll be putting together the first of a few videos which are part of my series of videos about the anthropogenic global warming theory as per global warming gas theory. I'm covering the work done by the Irish team, the Connollys, father and son team of physicists who have been looking at the whole global warming anthropogenic, idea. And if the assertions they are making are correct, then what they have actually done is completely disproved the whole theory of global warming via greenhouse gases. So that's very, very interesting too.
On that point, I mean, I'm as I said, I'm always open. I'm not sort of I don't, and yourself, you're like that. I mean, you've said they've got a good theory, got a good hypothesis there. It possibly is true. It may be part. It may be an element of part of the picture, because if you look back even thousands of years or millions of years, we've had times where there has been thousands of times more parts per million in terms of carbon, and temperatures were lower.
Yeah,
things don't correlate. Now that doesn't mean that carbon dioxide and methane aren't a greenhouse gas. They are, but they're very weak. They're very insignificant and they're very weak. They're not big players.
Yeah.
The big players is basically clouds, basically the sun. Oh boy, the sun is the biggest player. Then it's then the other thing is clouds and water vapor. Actually, water vapor is one of the biggest greenhouse gases out there. And the sun's interaction with clouds and the temperature, that relationship has a bigger effect. But that's not even we can't even model clouds, and we can't even model water vapor. It's just too much. We don't have the quantum computers to do that.
Yeah.
So what we're doing is we're looking at, it's like the LDL thing. We're looking at the LDL because that's the only thing we can. It's analogous to the LDL. That was the only thing we could basically, with our technology, measure, so we ignored everything else.
It's another model that does not work.
And exactly, and made a big fuss about something that is basically doesn't even correlate properly. Let alone even associate. It's just basically in some people's imaginations. And it's the same thing with and the thing that I always say to people, there's a NASA site where it actually shows the fertility. Actually, since greenhouse gases have been, carbon has been, dioxide is increasing our atmosphere, it's actually increasing the greening of the planet.
Yeah.
There's actually a NASA site. I'll actually put the link on because I can't remember where I've got it now.
Yep.
And it actually shows the greening of the whole planet.
Yeah.
You know?
The ideal carbon dioxide level for our planet is 4 times what it is now if you're a plant. For
pretty
optimal,
much.
Yeah. So
pretty much. If you really want to grow a lot of plants on the planet, you really need more carbon in the system. We're actually at a carbon deficit period in history on our planet, and so really, it's really hard to work out because I've looked at some like from Princeton. There's one academic there that basically has been talking about carbon, and he basically has been poo-pooing all the bullshit out there. But his view is basically the carbon, you need to double it each time in order to get 1 degree or the effect. But his sort of view also is that he's not certain about that either. He's not sort of claiming that this is the case, but he says in a constraint system where you can constrain it and look at only carbon, you would have to do that. So you would have to double each time, but that's ignoring all the other elements, the sun, which is the biggest driver, all the other elements. And so, and there's so many few parts per million. Just think of it, so many few parts per million. It's like 0.0000. It's so minor player that it can't drive anything. How can something so small drive anything? And that's the thing that people need to realize and they don't understand. Now, I look at, there's a hell of a lot more environmental issues out there, like pollution, like the plastics in the ocean, like all this sort of stuff that's actually damaging our food supply, introducing microplastics into the food supply, which are endocrine disruptors. There's and that's actually affecting the ability for certain animals to reproduce, let alone us. They are things which are far more concerning to me than fucking some greenhouse gas out there with unproven science and very poor methodology. Back in the 70s, they were talking about, the next ice age. Yeah. And that was based on the same measurements.
We are actually still in an ice age.
We are. We're in an interglacial warm period. That's all we are. And people don't realize, and that's what I said last time, that if we were able to push the greenhouse gases slightly higher than what they are, like over 500 parts per million and all that, and we could possibly, that's a very, it's like a longitudinal sort of effect because it stays in the atmosphere. It stays in the atmosphere, but it's still not enough. We would need even more. We would need to basically be burning like there's no tomorrow, and still it probably wouldn't work because it would not work. It's not even probable. It would not work. Yeah, I know. It's such a weak. It's just a weak. It's so weak. And the reality is, the only good thing would get out of it, fertility of the planet, and that would be a good thing, and that would actually be the greatest thing we could do for humanity and the animals on this planet. We would basically create such a bumper crop of vegetation, we would reduce desertification, a whole lot of other things, and we would basically increase the food supply, not only for ourselves, but for all other animals on this planet. So this is why, it's bizarre that these people would be so opposed to something which is so positive for humans and for other animals. And this is why it's not only a cult against humans, but it's also a cult against nature, against all animals in nature. It's an absolute cult because basically it is a death cult, as some people have described it, which can't handle the concept of death. Life and death, the carbon cycle of life and death. They just can't handle it in their they have an inability, and it's this sort of human idea that Tristan sometimes talks about, that this mentality, we've been sold this bullshit, we can live forever, we may be uploaded into machines, all this sort of stuff, and it's this sort of post-human type fantasy that's been pushed out there about death, life and death, and and it's appealing to some people.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to suck certain people, and people that are susceptible to indoctrination or susceptible to being manipulated by cult leaders and stuff like that tend to gravitate towards that. They're searching for meaning in life. They're searching for, somebody to save them or whatever. And so they tend to gravitate, and they become very much strong disciples. And that's what they are. And you can see them, the fanatical disciples of a death cult, and it's fortunately the rest of us, can't sit back and say, oh yeah, ignore them, because they're dangerous. They're invading farms, they're causing all sorts of grief. They're trying to manipulate people's minds. They're trying to make people feel ashamed for eating meat and stuff like that. They're guilt tripping people. They're doing all this sort of stuff, which what typical cults do. Pointing the finger, you are bad, we are good and holy and nice and all that. This is the danger, and this is the problem. That's why I call them the fifth. That they are basically the stormtroopers of the modern food industry. They're basically part of the establishment, even though they think they're anti-establishment. This is the funny part of it. They're so deep in that vegan hole, they can't see the sky, and they don't even realize they're being manipulated and used for other people's profits. And that's what's happening. That is really what is happening within that movement, and unfortunately that's what is a driver. Now, I do need to show a few other things to cover the methane side, which.
Okay, so point number one, it's not the cows, it's the shale gas.
Exactly, which is important.
Yep,
and also we need to look at the numbers and why the narrative on the cows. What happens is when we look at our inventory, they actually go to the USDA and they actually always look at the US numbers. So they focus on the US numbers. Now, obviously the US numbers since the mid-70s when the food pyramid came out. And then it all went down. I thought we were talking about an ice age back then, mate. The coming ice age. They were talking about it back in the 70s. I can remember getting Scientific American back in the 70s, and they actually talking about the next ice age.
Yeah.
And that is when the food pyramid came in, and that's when it started just going down. You can see it just goes down and down and down. Current, but they will say that the Americans may have lowered theirs, but the Chinese have are consuming massive amounts, and so they actually are pushing up the numbers. Well, let's take a look at the world numbers then. World inventory by year. So if we go back to the 1970s when the food pyramid came out, you can see it's over 1 billion head of cattle globally.
Yeah.
And seems like the Chinese aren't consuming so much beef after all.
Right.
It's less than what it was in the 70s.
Yeah.
How can it be less than it was in the 70s, but the cows, are they farting more than they were in the 70s, mate?
Yeah, they must be. They must be, Harry. More farting.
Exactly. Yeah. These awful cows, they've up-regulated their farting levels. That's, so, they must be very smart to be able to, they must be as smart as the vegans.
I think what's increased is the vegan brain farts. That's what's been increasing.
Probably. Not the silence of vegans. Yeah, it probably, it
Very good.
probably is. It probably is. But you can look at the numbers and you can see that, and look at world population numbers. This is back in the 70s, 3.7 million.
Yep.
Okay, that's our population back then. The birth
Yep.
rate's still coming down. Look at the birth rate, how it's collapsing.
Yep.
Something about our diet, isn't it?
Yep. Yep.
Now,
So
there's
this is very clear, isn't it?
this is the world clock. We've doubled the population and we've
Yep.
decreased the amount of cattle.
Yep.
So it's not the cattle, is it?
Mm. Well, it can't be, can it?
Well, unless you're a vegetard, it can be.
Well,
They
it
don't
is.
look
If you
statistical,
buy
remember?
into a religious ideology and
Exactly.
facts and logic have got, facts and logic destroy our vegan ideas every time, actually,
Precisely.
is what it is.
Yeah. You're told when you join the vegan church,
Yeah.
you are not allowed to look at these statistics. They're false.
Yeah. Of
They're
course.
not real.
That's,
They're not
that's
real.
That's some fake news right there, Harry. Fake news.
Exactly. It is. It is. I mean, all these organisations must be in it as well. They must be in with the carnivores.
Yeah. Well, you watch, there'll be an advisory on this video in America after this, Harry, that'll say, here is some other information, just for balance.
Exactly.
Yeah, my
Well,
channel
we
will
need
be flagged as a propagandist channel if it hasn't already.
Oh, mate.
There you go.
What? You're surprised?
No, not really. I'm just like, oh, whatever.
Oh, exactly. And the other thing is, when we look at, we're not the only primate, or the chimps. There's actually this primate, Tasieras, and they're basically just 100% carnivore.
Yeah.
They eat insects primarily, but you can actually see their actual shape. They basically, it's really hard to see. See, they don't have a protruding stomach like us, flat.
Right.
Where other apes, even the chimps, actually have this sort of bigger gut.
Yeah.
So it's a more, they tend to have, it's much closer. You can see they don't have this big bulging gut, especially like the gorillas or anything like that. And so because basically the gut size is much smaller, like us, we don't have a bulging gut, our rib cage doesn't bulge out like that because basically we've got a smaller gut. It's simple as that, and so there are no primates. Well, there are, and they've got a gut similar to us. When they're carnivorous, fully carnivorous, they've got a similar gut to us. When they're like chimps, which are omnivores, sort of omnivores, slightly more carnivorous omnivores, they still have a bit of a bigger gut because they still, consume that extra. Because they, as I said, they don't have the endurance. They've got those quick twitching. So if they can't get enough, then they're forced into foods which are starvation foods. And when they're competing, and when you're competing, and an animal develops its physiology based on its environment and environmental pressures. This is normal evolution. So it's understandable, those, as that other group grew from 142 to 204 and actually outnumbered and squeezed those into a smaller area, that other group of chimps, obviously they would have had less pickings. So they would have probably been forced into consuming more leaves and fruit and stuff like that out of necessity to survive. And so they would have probably multiple times also eaten their own shit in order to basically, their feces, in order to basically extract more nutrients because they're not eating meat. But the thing is, when even these researchers observed, when the chips are down and there are two foods there, they know which one to go for, and it's not the fruit, and it's not the leaves, which are nutrient poor. Animals go after nutrient dense foods in nature. They always have. Every animal that's observed in nature goes after nutrient dense foods. Our ancestors did the same thing. Every animal. It's well known in zoology, well known in science. Every single bloody animal in the sea, or on land or in the air goes after nutrient dense food. They prioritize those foods. It's not by accident, because animals need to survive. and perpetuate their numbers and so on. And they have to prioritize nutrient-dense foods. And so it doesn't surprise me the chimp behavior. But it's important for us to basically demystify this sort of stuff for people so they can understand what is really happening. And so they're no longer being manipulated by so many people who basically try to pull the wool over their head and and deceive them, because it's really easy to do.
Yeah.
Now,
here's another picture. Here's another picture of one of those guys that you were talking about. I quite like this one too. There we go. Look at
that. I love that monkey.
Yeah. Good.
Yes. Another carnivore monkey like us.
So we got to the point where we decided that, okay, assuming that methane is a problem, which it's not.
That's right.
Then even if we assume it is a problem and ignore all the science that tells us that it's not,
precisely.
Then if there's an increase in methane, if there has been an increase in methane, it's not because of the number of cattle.
It's not
farting.
Exactly.
Right.
Precisely.
Good.
The numbers are not there. And even though we've doubled our population, we've got less numbers than we had in the 70s.
Yes.
In terms of cattle.
Yep.
And that's important for people to know, that we've got
so
less numbers than we had.
Less cattle. Right.
Double the people since the as I showed, the world sort of population clock, and the population back in the 70s, which was 3.7 billion. So we've doubled the population, but we've actually gone from over 1 billion to less than 1 billion, 993 or whatever, a million sort of head of cattle. So we've actually gone backwards in terms of high quality nutrition from cattle, in a sense. Which is important. Which is important because basically the vegetards out there have been saying that, because of China, because of all this third world people and all that, we've been basically massively increasing all this. It's not actually meat that's been increasing. It's basically that bullshit. It's a lie, because it's all the actual crap that we've been putting in, and nothing to do with the actual meat. Right. And just to remind people, when they do read that study, that what the study is actually saying is that cow farts have a carbon, the isotope, the type of carbon that actually, the fingerprint in the atmosphere, which they record from cows, is carbon-12.
Yes.
That has been declining. Not increasing, but declining.
Right.
Since the 1970s. It's been declining. And I showed you the numbers.
Yeah.
So what the study does is it statistically has a strong statistical correlation with the actual inventory numbers on the planet in regards to cows. The only thing that's been going up is carbon-13.
Right.
So, and that comes from fracking, from basically what is called shale oil and gas.
Yeah. Yeah.
So shale oil and gas, we call it fracking for, it's sort of because of the method that they use. But basically, this is a study that just recently came out from Cornwall University, and it was basically on the 14th of August of this year. And it basically shows that the source of the methane, even if you think that it's a problem, is coming from fracking. So if we were to stop fracking completely tomorrow, in 12 years' time, that wouldn't be an issue anymore.
Right. Well, it's not an issue now, of course.
Yeah, I know, but for the vegetards, and all that. And if you think about it, fracking has nothing to do with actually economics, because basically, if you look at the economic side of fracking, it basically doesn't make sense.
Right. Because
they're actually losing money. It's being subsidized by the US government for energy security purposes.
Yeah.
And it's there's a reason why some people are saying the reason why the US basically took out Libya, wants to take out Iran and all that is to basically keep the oil price to a certain level, which basically makes shale oil, because there's actually derivatives that are tied through the banking system on this. And if oil was to drop too much, shale would be snuffed out like that, mate.
Right.
So if you basically get Iran coming in and increasing their oil production, you get Libya to come back, you get Venezuela to basically, because they're the biggest, actually they've got the biggest deposits of any country in the world, the reserves. And if they were basically to come back online in big numbers, basically shale oil is cactus. Right. And basically what that means is that puts a big hole in the American economy and in America's energy security. So it's more to do with that. And I mean, people can go to the Pentagon, type websites where they actually have certain things about energy security and all that. And actually see some of this stuff is even publicly available. It's not, get over it. And, countries are always have their reasons, and empires, will always come and go and do their, do whatever they have to do to basically maintain their power, and keep there and all that. Now, there is one other thing that I did forget, and I just remembered. I should have looked at this earlier. This will shock the living daylights out of the veg-tards. I like to shock people. You probably realize.
Really?
You've realised that, haven't you? Okay. Let me just bring it up first to make sure that it's up. What's it doing now? Come on.
We're having fun with technology today, aren't we?
I am. God almighty.
Must be all that brain fog from all those cow farts we've been sniffing.
It is basically. I blame the cow farts. It's definitely it. Yeah. Let me share this. Nope, not that. Happy apes caught cannibalizing their young.
Well, there you go.
Oops. It's not only things that humans have done in the past. Oops.
So, do they get the Parent of the Year award, or?
I don't know. Yes, these are chimpanzees, as you can see. Actually, sorry, these are bonobos, actually, which are related to chimps. They say these are the peaceful ones. Remember? Fuck me, the peaceful ones are doing this.
Right.
What does that tell? It sort of just blows out of the water that entire edifice. It blows that. So when you basically got constraints, they'll even freaking go after. They'll even go after the young.
Right. Good.
Meat must be really important to them. Apparently. God, I'm surprised. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
I've been sheltered for far too long, mate. I'm absolutely shocked. What can you say? I mean, that just based, and it's basically this institute, the Institute of Evolutionary Anthropology from Leipzig, Germany.
Yep.
These guys really do. They've done the isotope analysis and all this sort of stuff. They do some really good research around the world when at that, and they're not unbiased. They go out there and do. I mean, German science before the Second World War was leading the whole world. People sometimes forget some of the top physiologists that were doing, sort of experiments and looking at actual humans, not rats, humans, with different lipid issues and all that. These and all these different metabolic pathways and all that. So they were just leading the world. We just ignored that because the Americans won and they had the calorie sort of approach and didn't want to even look at any of the German science, and we actually fell back as a consequence, as a in terms of physiology and science, we actually fell backwards. It's only now where people are starting to do some of this research, starting to look at this, and even looking wider into the animal world and starting to see things that, hold on, we had all these assumptions, but they're not actually right. You know, when we do actually very close, detailed, high quality research, we're actually not that sort. No, that's the vegan sort.
Yes.
You know,
Actual
not that
high-level
sort.
studies.
Actually real proper proper experimental and observational studies where we've gone out in the field and observed with cameras and actually recorded real events, real behavior, real interactions of different animals. We've actually come back with a completely different picture. I know a lot of those people have been, some of them because some of those in that part of the academia are vegtards and they've come back disturbed, but bad luck.
Yeah.
The reality is if you can't cope with reality, that's your fault. Your problem. Don't basically lie to people and manipulate their minds with tall stories, which is what they've been doing for a very long time. So it's about time they got their ass kicked in that regard. Now, this is the one that I actually wanted to. This is my recent one on. This is a population that's down in South America, Bolivia.
Right.
These are people living in the Amazon. They pretty much do a lot of hunting, fishing, foraging, stuff like that. Some of the ones that have actually moved out of their sort of native area do a bit of farming as well because they've interacted with Spanish speaking people and people like that. So they've actually changed. They're not all traditional, and it's very hard now to find a very traditional tribal society. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
That doesn't exist. What Western A Price recorded back then is a different thing than what we see today, and that's very important. But this is the important thing. What do they say? Despite a meat-heavy diet, indigenous tribes has the world's healthiest hearts, and this is where, we found another paradox. Oh shit, why? And you can see from the language that they use that you can understand that these people that they're scratching their head. What is the reason? It can't be the meat. It's that hatred for the meat. That pathological hatred, that ideological pathological hatred. And that's why I talk about the study, but I don't really like the people behind it, if you know what I mean.
Sure.
This is the actual study because they're biased. It's like Christopher Gartner, who did the study, the A to Z, showed Atkins was better, but he literally hated his own work. Because he basically just couldn't accept that Atkins could be better than his vegetarian diet. It's just that cognitive dissonance, that level of absolute craziness that exists. Actual study that's actually on PubMed that actually goes through. I'm not gonna go through it now. We're having a chat. If people want to read it, I'll put a link. They can actually go through it and actually check it. I'll send it through to you. I'll email it to you.
Good.
And basically you can look at the details in a more scientific way, far more than I can, in that regard, and pull it apart in a much greater methodological way than I can. But the important is that these people have two things that they notice. Even though they're having such a heavy meat diet, they've got low cholesterol and high inflammation.
Interesting.
Now, the high inflammation is actually coming. High inflammation is actually coming from not the diet, but from they're infested with a whole lot of parasites.
Okay.
So basically, what's happening is their immune system is in hyperdrive, trying to kill off these pathogens that are in there, and basically it's using all that cholesterol because the immune system uses cholesterol in order to fight off the infection. That is what is happening. But the important thing is here that these people talk about, these are some of the sort of animals like the fish they eat and stuff like that. But sort of the important, when you look at the sort of research, what they're actually saying, and I'll actually go to let me just bring up that comment area. I'm still sharing?
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. The comment area, this is, drives you up the wall, and this is in the Lancet, and basically they say that they noted that 2/3 of the adults suffered from intestinal helminths, whatever they are, some sort of parasite. Despite such a high inflammatory burden, the author found a very low prevalence of coronary arteriosclerosis as measured by CAC, coronary artery calcium. They had the lowest they've ever recorded by a CAC score. Even though they have a heavy meat diet, they eat other shit as well, but they have a heavy meat diet. And basically, these people have some of the lowest, and most of the other foods that they do eat are low glycemic anyway, so they're not going to do you much harm. They're not going to basically engage the Randall cycle in any big way, which is a very important thing. And I actually remind people that the Randall cycle is a gradient. It's not an on-off thing.
Correct. Yes, correct. Yeah.
Because people basically said it's an on-off thing. It's not. It's a gradient.
That's right.
It's a gradient of response, and the more inflammatory stuff you've got, the higher the insulin, the higher the IGF, the higher these and other pathways, actually anabolic pathways, respond within the body and then inhibit other pathways. So it's a gradient. And I always say, when I'm looking like the Okinawans and all these people that eat these sort of diets, what is their major source of meat? Like the Chinese as well. It's pork.
Yeah.
And what's the thing about pork that's strange compared to all? Well, it's got less leucine. It's got less anabolic sort of amino acids. So it tends to have the lowest insulinogenic effect of any other meat. And as a consequence of that, since it actually has less of an insulinogenic effect, when you combine some carbs which are low glycemic, which also are having a low insulinogenic effect, the gradients, that means of the Randall, the effect is much lower.
Yeah.
And you're also doing physical work, so you're burning away a lot of that energy before it can even become a problem. Because it's not building up in the system, the transit time is much lower. So the gradient is going to be much lower. So it's not only what you eat, but your activities, your lifestyle and all that, the combination that basically explains. Then you move to the city. You're no longer a peasant. You're living in Shanghai. You're eating highly palatable foods. You're sedentary. That rice is a problem, isn't it? That cookie is a problem. So things change. Those anabolic pathways are being pushed much higher than what they used to be. You're not basically, the clearance is different. So these are the reasons why people say, oh, they always ate rice. Yeah, they ate very little rice, first of all, because they didn't have a lot. And that's well known. And I've discussed that before. But on top of that, they were doing a lot of physical work. And they were burning all that sugar off, that small amount that they were getting. And on top of that, they were eating a lot of foods which have a lower insulinogenic effect. So you're having less pushing those anabolic pathways. So, there are reasons. You have to put it in context of historical moments and lifestyle practices that are tied to that diet. When you remove it and put it into a different environment, it can have other ramifications. One thing about meat, you could put in any environment. Your insulin is only going to be 1.3. If you eat just meat, it's not going to go any higher, just enough for muscle protein synthesis. So the thing is, there are optimal foods that in any environment are not a problem, and then most of the other diets that can be problematic outside the context of their lifestyle, dietary, historical moment, or whatever else. So people need to nuance that and understand that. And that's why, people sort of confuse the two and mix up the two. It's like, for instance, when George V. Mann went and did research on the Maasai warriors and actually saw that, even in old age, they still had similar blood pressure. They were still in really good health and all that. And then there was a whole lot of other researchers some years later that actually went to Nairobi, which is the capital of Kenya. They didn't go out to see the Maasai. They actually went and saw the city slickers that actually had moved away from those villages and they were eating refined carbohydrates. So they went to the morgues and they found a whole lot of Maasai, and basically these people had calcification issues and all that. Well, hold on. These people were no longer on their traditional diet, and they made a whole big fuss about it.
Anyone would think a diet based on plants was actually bad for you, Harry.
Couldn't be. Am I deluded?
They think we are. That's the sad thing.
They
really genuinely believe with a religious fervor in their ideology that tells them that meat will kill you 3 weeks from yesterday.
Well, that's the thing, and that's the biggest problem that we face is that these people basically are being manipulated by charlatans who have got an a cultish ideology that they're promoting, and this really has come out of the hippie movement. It's really sort of an evolution of the hippie vegetarian movement. That's what the modern vegan movement is. It's really that old leftist, environmentalist, hippie type movement that has evolved. Their kids and many others that have fallen into it evolved out of that movement. That's where it came. It didn't come out of nowhere. It came from that source. And you only have to look at places like Byron Bay and places like that in Australia where most of these movements came out of and their followers. And I mean, people like Freely and all that, they come from that region, from that region that she's just to the north of that part of east New South Wales, because she's from Queensland, that part, but she's not too far away from that area. All that area, that corridor, Lennox, all those sort of areas. I know all the areas. You've got all these alternative lifestyle people throughout that whole area. It's like, I even buy products, I shouldn't say this, but I do. I buy from Byron Bay ghee from some vegetarians that actually, they really make really high quality. Oh, the smell of it is just fantastic. You smell the ghee, it's grass fed, it's basically organic, and it really smells like I've never smelt. So they have their place anyway. They can, as long as they supply me with good ghee. But the reality is that is where that movement came, and I suspect, I don't know, I don't really know about New Zealand, and I don't really know about North America and other parts of the world. I do know that California is sort of a hotbed for in the US, but there may be other areas in the US that I'm not aware of. I know that in Britain it's London primarily. In Germany primarily, it's more the roots come from the south of Germany primarily. That's where those sort of movements south, closer to Austria, those sort of parts, Munich, those sort of areas. That's where those old traditions about the environment and that focus on comes from. It doesn't come from the industrial north or the industrial west of Germany. It comes from these southern sort of rural type areas and towns and cities. So there are areas, and this movement has existed for quite some time. It's sort of reinvented itself. If you go back 19th century, 18th century, it's reinvented itself in many different ways. But one thing that it had in common is that it was, it tended to be either partially vegetarian or very vegetarian in many different aspects. So it had that strong vegetarian element. This sort of modern vegan sort of element is just sort of, it's sort of like it's the next evolution. I call it like the next evolution to processed junk food. the next evolution to this is basically vegetarianism on steroids. It's just the next evolution of a bankrupt ideology. It's like, we can't go any further with that. We'll just go for broke. And they've found very powerful beneficiaries that are supporting them, like Earthling Ed and many others, that can see there's a lot of money in it. And it's good that Tristan, Bobby, and many others are doing the research. I mean, I don't have that time. I mean, yourself probably don't. You're more focused on the nutritional side and aspect, trying to help people in that way. But at least there are some people out there that are trying to expose it. And that's all we can do as a community. It's basically, we've got certain knowledge, certain talents. Let's just use those to the different degrees we can and collaborate amongst ourselves and basically get the message out and stuff like that. And as I said, if you want more information about different specific things, if you've gone out and you've confronted certain vegetards and they've basically come with certain arguments, come back to me or Bart or other people that have got a bit of knowledge about these things and give us an opportunity to give you some ammo. Because at the end of the day, we want to empower the community to basically go out there and fight the good fight, because these people are trying to destroy our food supply and our ancestral heritage. My sort of aim, and it's really to expose some of the myths, because the thing is, a lot of people are being lied to, their health is being damaged, and my health was damaged as well from lies. I followed the program and got sick and all that.
Oh, you did it wrong, Perry.
I apparently, actually, I've got some good news. I did see a cardiologist about 2 weeks ago. The previous, and that was a bit funny anyway. So I walk in and my regular cardiologist wasn't there, so away sick, and so I had this young bloke. He's probably out of university, or hadn't been a doctor too long. He was in his probably late 20s or whatever. And so I sat down, let's see how this is going to go. So initially I said, look, just before we start, can you tell me how the scan went? Because they did a heart scan to see where the bypass surgery happened, whether the actual veins that it became arteries are clear and normal. So they're good blood perfusion and normal, mate. Normal.
Awesome. Good.
The news is normal is really good.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty much happy. I'm rapt about that. So after now nearly a decade, actually the heart he said it's normal. It's working really well. So that's good to hear. So some of the stuff that I've been doing, I will do it on my channel eventually. I want to do a video of how to decalcify and look at the research of Japanese, the Netherlands research and stuff like that, and metaquinone 4, how important that is. And I've been doing it now for a couple of years, using metaquinone 4 to basically decalcify. But you've got to do it in certain ways and stages, because you don't want to leave soft plaque around. So you've got to reduce the inflammation, anti-inflammatory. Yeah, there's a number of things that you have to do. Get increase your biosynthesis of mitochondria and a whole lot of other things. So it's a complicated number of steps before you start, going head first. I wouldn't basically start pulling out calcium, which stabilizes plaque, on an inflammatory diet. That would be dangerous in my book. But it's good news. I got a lecture on statins from him as well. Then he told me, oh, fucking hell. And you know what he said to me? He said, oh, you haven't heard the latest study. And he started telling me the study, which I had heard from another friend. And I said, that's a Mendelian study, isn't it? He said, how did you know that? I said,
because I have fucking heard of it.
I said, it's useless. I said, these people are on an inflammatory diet. Just because certain people have a high susceptibility tells you nothing. What foods basically will affect you. It's completely confounded. It's a questionnaire with basically genetics. I mean, what use is that from me? I said, look at my results. And I said, I'm on a low inflammatory diet. I'm better, I'm healthier, I don't need medication or anything like that. And, you're giving me a hard time. He was trying to push statins onto me.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake, it just gave me the shits,
Yeah.
I left out there steaming. I actually got downstairs and I actually punched something. My hand hurt a bit, but I was fuming. And I know
Wow.
he'll send a message. He said, I'm going to send a message, like he was threatening me. I'm going to send a message to your GP to tell him that, as if I'm not complying, And then I had to tell him a bit of a lie that I actually am taking aspirin, which I'm not, because it actually damages your lungs. It's not good.
Yeah.
So I basically, had to basically bullshit my way out of that, because I still need for them to be able to do scans in the future. So I can't, I try to be as diplomatic as possible, even though he was basically, literally verbally assaulting me nearly. Absolutely,
And this is a boy who's basically a few years ago was shitting his pants.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And I'm a 53-year-old, older person, an elder, so to speak, where he should have a bit of respect. And I wasn't even giving him a hard time, and he was basically just laying it into me.
Hey, respect my authority.
Right.
Oh, well, that's good news anyway, Harry.
Exactly. That's the main thing.
Yep.
I'm on the right path. That's all that really matters, and that's why that other about inflammation, that other study that I just showed you is really important for people to understand that it's not pathogens that are the problem. They will not. It's basically if those glycocalyx are not, because when you actually eat meat, you're actually putting in there methionine and cysteine, especially from eggs, cysteine, and they will go in there and sit where those little sugar molecules on top of the glycocalyx, they will sit there, they'll sulfonate those glycocalyx and protect your endothelial cells and create a negative charge. And the same pericellular matrix exists around bacteria, lipoproteins, all these sort of things. And they have to be sulfonated, and that sulfonation creates a negative charge. Nothing can stick. They just bounce off each other. They repel each other, and they flow through your arteries. And it doesn't matter how many little wiggly things from the environment, little pathogens or little worms are in there that are, making your immune system go ballistic. You're not going to get any arterial calcification, because that's not the inflammation. It's the food inflammation that's the problem. It's the sugar that will actually have a positive charge and stick, and actually then glue it and have that stickiness, sort of those advanced glycation end products. Yep. That's what's going to fuck up your glycocalyx and actually collapse them for 6 hours and destroy eventually over time. If you're continually assaulting your arteries like that, will damage your arteries and cause all these problems. And people need to understand that. You need to get off an anti-inflammatory environment diet, and then you can over time your body will start healing. It naturally heals. You can actually accelerate it with high doses with a certain protocol, but you have to do it in the proper way so you don't put yourself at risk. But if you do it the slow way, it still will work. It'll just take longer, But at the end of the day, you're really, as I said, you're either you're either eating meat and improving your health, or you're eating sugar and seed oils, which is what Beyond Burgers are as well, and you're slowly killing yourself. So the choice is yours. You've seen what your ancestors were eating. You've seen what our closest biological relatives, the chimps, are doing as well. You've got no excuse. You've got no excuse to say, well, I don't know. You do know now. It's been demystified for you. And I think I've pretty much said enough, unless you want to say something about...
No, I think that's a fantastic place to wind up, and I think you've done a really good job of summarising the position statement, which, as you rightly say, is about the sharing of ideas within our carnivore community. So Frankie, if you want to start your videos by saying hello, boys and girls, without crediting me for having, invented that phrase altogether, You can, and I caught him doing that the other day when I was looking at one of his videos. There's one he genuinely does start where he says, "Hello, boys and girls," and then you can see it go across his face. He goes, "Oh, fuck. I just said the wrong thing, didn't I?" Well, yes, but did he edit it out? No, he didn't. So sharing of ideas, absolutely. If there are tricky, argumentation points that you want to get into, absolutely, ask us. We can probably help. And don't get sucked in really by this whole what is ostensibly a religious ideology. It's a cultish,
as I call it, a cultish misanthropic movement.
Yep, that's the one. And there are many good things that religion does and achieves. I'm not bagging religion by saying I'm comparing it to a religion because the fervor with which people believe the information they're given on blind faith without checking that information is stunning. Although, as Harry has also pointed out, not remotely surprising actually when you look at how humans think, how they're socialized, and how we've evolved. Starting right back at the beginning of this discussion, several hours ago, where we basically started by saying, well, what do chimpanzees eat? And we found out it's not what we thought. So, all the blocks, all the cornerstones of the ideology that the vegans have put up for us, every single one of them fails. The ethics thing fails. The anthropogenic global greenhouse effect fails. The cows farting fails. The cancer giving us meat fails, and that's been shown up this week dramatically with the study where some actual scientists looked at the high level association-based, questionnaire-based pseudo research that's been done, and they've actually said, we're not particularly impressed with this. This is not high level stuff. These are not high level studies, is what they said. They basically said, no. Minus 10 points and go back to the start. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. And just people, you enjoy your meat because, frankly, not good science here telling you that meat is going to kill you. So there we have it. We've put the world to rights again, I think, Harry. Thank you once again for your time. It's been enlightening. It's been good, and as I say, in terms of effort on my part, it's great because I can sit here and you can just go blah 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 and empty your voluminous knowledge out for people to sift through and find the pearls, which was most of it, to be fair. So I do thank you for that, and we will talk again very soon.